Welcome back, everyone, to the Seniors Confessions channel. My house is in Ha Long. As soon as summer began, my mother-in-law called. The whole family wants to vacation by the sea and stay at our place for a month. My husband laughed and replied, 10 million per person, and you can stay as long as you like. It was an early summer morning, and the rising sun bathed the small alley in front of my house in gold. The sea breeze blew in, carrying that familiar, salty scent. Mixed into it were the sounds of buses, sugarcane juice vendors, and tourists dragging their suitcases along the pavement. Whenever summer arrives, Ha Long gets packed with people, and my heart starts to feel heavy. Because I know that for my family, summer isn't just about sun, sea, and tourists. It's also about an obsession named my husband's relatives. My house isn't some luxurious villa, it's just a narrow 3-story townhouse. My husband and I had to borrow and save for many years to be able to buy it. The first floor serves as both a garage and a storage space for my husband's work equipment. The second floor is a living room combined with a small but cozy kitchen. The third floor has exactly 2 bedrooms. One is for my husband and me, and one small room is for our daughter, little MIT. For the 3 of us, the house is just right, but if you add 8 more people, it immediately turns into a cramped, hot, and suffocating box. For the last 2 years, every summer, my husband's side of the family has flocked down here for a beach vacation. They say they are just coming for a few days to cool off, but those few days turn into several weeks. Then for nearly 3 months, they eat in my house, sleep in my house, bathe and wash in my house, and use my electricity and water. Then finally, when they leave, they only offer a few words. Thanks to you too, the whole family had such a fun summer. Meanwhile, I am left with skyrocketing electricity bills, a messy house, a daughter who lost her bedroom, and an exhausted body. That morning, I was changing the bedsheets for little MIT when my husband's phone rang. The screen displayed the name, Mom Bitch. I don't know why. Just looking at that name alone, my hands froze in midair. Vin, my husband, who was checking the guest booking log, glanced at me and then turned on the speakerphone. My mother-in-law's voice rang out sweet as honey. Vin, it's summer now. The whole family is planning to go to the beach for a few months to cool off. You guys should get the house ready. I stood frozen by the edge of the bed. The sentence sounded like an ordinary announcement, but to me, it was like an alarm bell. Before Vin could even reply, she continued. Her voice was as casual as if this house belonged to the whole clan. This time it's Aunt Tu, Nung and her husband, Koa, and the kids, only 8 people total. It's not many. Your house is near the sea. It's convenient for swimming and saves on hotel costs. Only 8 people. She spoke so lightly, as if 8 people were just 8 extra shirts hanging in a closet. But those 8 plus the 3 of us would make 11 people crammed into our already small house. I thought about 2 bathrooms serving over a dozen people. I thought about mattresses covering the living room floor. I thought about the kitchen fires burning every single day, the washing machine running without a break, the air conditioner running all night long. Just imagining it, I already felt my chest tighten. It wasn't over. Mrs. Bitch added excitedly, oh, this year Nung is bringing some swimsuits, floaties, waterproof phone bags, sunglasses, and seashell keychains to sell to tourists. Koa will help out too. Since we're family living near the beach, we might as well earn some extra cash, nothing to be shy about. Hearing that, my hand gripping the bedsheet tightened. So they weren't just coming to stay, they planned to turn my house into a warehouse, a rest stop, and a base for their tourism business. Then she gave instructions on how to arrange things, as if it had all been planned. The little girl's room for the kids, and mattresses in the living room for the adults. You two just bear with it and sleep with the child for a few months. We're all family, don't be so formal. Hearing that my daughter's room was being divided up, I couldn't hold it in anymore. Just as I was about to speak, Vin signaled for me to stay silent. He looked straight at the phone, his lips curving into a very faint smile. His voice was so calm that it sent a chill down my spine. Fine, Mom, if you and the others want to come stay for 3 months, then just come. It's 10 million per person, per month. You can stay as comfortably as you like. The other end of the line went silent immediately. It took a few seconds before Mrs. Bitch's voice screeched out. What did you say? We're family and relatives, and you're charging us like a hotel? Vin sat still, his gaze unwavering, while I turned to look at my husband, feeling both surprised and shaken inside. For the past 2 years, he had always told me to be patient to keep the peace, but this time he wasn't backing down. I understood that the call that morning wasn't just about 8 people coming to stay at the beach. It was the final line to see if this house was our home or a free hostel for the whole family to treat as they pleased. After my husband's words, the whole room seemed to go quiet. But in that silence, memories from 2 summers ago flooded my mind, crystal clear. As if it had just happened yesterday. People often say that once something is in the past, you should let it go for peace of mind. But there are things you can't just forget even if you want to. Especially when your endurance is repeatedly taken for granted as an obligation. I still remember the first summer after my husband and I moved to Ha Long to start our life. Back then, my mother-in-law called to say she and some aunts were coming down for a few days to see the sea. They hadn't been anywhere in a long time. She told me to prepare some sleeping space for them. I was genuinely happy at that time. I thought my mother-in-law and relatives lived far away. It had been a while since they visited us and the grandchildren. As a daughter-in-law, it was only right to welcome them thoughtfully. I even washed the blankets by hand, bought new pillows, and went to the market for fresh seafood to prepare a proper first meal for everyone. But that so-called few days didn't stop at a few days. My mother-in-law arrived first, followed by Aunt Tu. Then my sister-in-law, Hong Nung, brought her 2 children down. A few days later came my cousin Tuan Ka, then an aunt who claimed she was just passing by to visit. Before one person left, another would call to say they heard Vin's house was near the beach and they were coming to stay for a while, and it just went on like that. My small house is packed with people. And every morning when I open my eyes, all I see are shoes, suitcases, clothes, and plastic bags are scattered all over the walkway. Mit's room has been taken over as a sleeping area for 3 children. My daughter, only 6 at the time, stood by the door hugging her teddy bear, asking me blankly, "Mommy, where do I sleep tonight?" I felt a lump in my throat when I heard her. I told her to sleep with us for a few days, but those few days stretched out for almost the entire summer. Our bed was never big to begin with, and with MIT in the middle, it's even tighter. Every night I curl up at the very edge, afraid that a slight movement might wake her up. As for the living room, it goes without saying. At night, mattresses cover the floor, and in the morning, pillows and blankets are piled up, with snack wrappers and soda cans under the table. There were days I'd just finished sweeping, and the kids would come back from the beach with sandy feet, running straight from the door to the sofa, leaving sand crunching all over the floor. When I brought it up, Hong Nung just laughed. "They're just kids. It wouldn't be a beach trip without a little sand, would it?" That dismissive comment made me so angry I could choke, but I had to swallow it down. My house only has 2 bathrooms, and every morning, over a dozen people share them, some rushing to get to the beach, others complaining about lost towels. Some complain about low water pressure, while others bang on the door shouting, "Hurry up, there are people waiting." I'd be cooking breakfast while listening to arguments in the hallway, my head spinning, while the washing machine ran from morning until night. Between beach clothes, towels, swimwear, and sun hoodies, the fridge was always stuffed with their seafood, soda, and fruit. There were even days when Mit's carton of milk was pushed right out of the fridge. The electricity bill that month skyrocketed, with the AC running nearly all day because everyone complained of the heat. At night, the AC had to be on in the living room, Mit's room, and our room because the little one couldn't sleep. The water bill went up too, and don't even get me started on the groceries. Every time they came back from the beach, they'd complain of hunger, demanding seafood, hot pot, noodles, or late-night porridge. My mother-in-law kept saying, "We have guests, just bear with it a little. Don't let people say my daughter-in-law is stingy." That one accusation of being stingy was enough to silence me throughout the first summer. It's not as if my husband and I hadn't spoken up. Once, after dinner, Vin gently told his mother that our house was small, and while having everyone visit was nice, staying too long was inconvenient. Dung and I still have work, and little MIT needs a place to study. My mother-in-law just laughed it off. "Yeah, I know, it's such a bother for you too." Quote. Yet the very next day, she invited another relative down and told me, "Clear a corner of the living room for Aunt Nam, she's arriving tonight." By the second summer, they didn't even bother to be considerate anymore. That time, Hong Nung brought down several large crates of goods, swim rings, hats, plastic sandals, sunglasses, and waterproof phone pouches. The first floor of my house was piled up like a wholesale warehouse. One day, while I was cooking, I heard a stranger at the door asking, "Do you sell waterproof pouches here, miss?" I was stunned into silence. Then Hong Nung ran out from inside, grinning like a real shop owner. I told her not to turn my house into a storefront. She replied nonchalantly, "You're so difficult. I'm just storing a few boxes. I'm not taking the house away. Your house is near the beach. It's a waste not to use it." Quote, my mother-in-law, sitting nearby, immediately defended her daughter. She's just trying to earn a little extra money. You have the means, so helping her out won't kill anyone. Quote, I looked at my husband, Vin, who kept his head down in silence, and my heart turned cold, bit by bit. For those 2 summers, I held my tongue not because I couldn't get angry, but because I feared being labeled a selfish daughter-in-law, feared putting my husband in a tough spot, and feared upsetting his mother. But the more I endured, the more they overstepped. The kinder I was, the more I was treated like a servant obligated to serve them. When my mother-in-law called to announce that the whole extended family was coming to stay for 3 months as if it were a given, I finally understood. If we didn't set boundaries this time, the home we had worked so hard to build would never truly be ours again. But to understand why Vin's words that morning made my mother-in-law so furious, we must go back to the time we decided to leave the city and move to Ha Long to start our lives. Before we had our current house, we rented a small apartment in the city. Our jobs back then were not too bad. Vin worked as an operations manager for a chain of serviced apartments, and I worked as an accountant for a construction company. Our combined income sounded decent, but rent, childcare, medical expenses for our child, and monthly living costs kept rising like the tide. Little MIT was often sick when she was small, coughing whenever the weather changed. She would get fevers in the middle of the night. Some months I took her to the hospital 3 times. Our rented room was cramped, noisy, and filled with exhaust fumes, leaving no space for the child to run around. Many nights, Vin would sit by the window, watching our child sleep and sighing. One day, he told me, Dung, what if we moved to Ha Long? I've worked in the hospitality industry for years. Quote, I believe that if we provide decent, clean service and don't take advantage of guests, we can make a living. I was very worried after hearing that. Leaving the city wasn't as simple as moving from one house to another. It meant changing our jobs, environment, social circle, and our child's future. But looking at my husband's eyes, and recalling those nights our daughter wheezed in our cramped room, I knew I couldn't be afraid forever. We sold our old car, withdrew our meager savings, took out a bank loan, and bought a small house near a tourist area. On the day we signed the loan papers, my hands shook so much I could barely hold the pen. Vin held my hand and whispered, I can't promise we'll be rich right away, but I promise I won't let you and our child regret this. That sentence was what I clung to throughout the most grueling early years. But when my husband's family found out, no one offered a single word of congratulations. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Bitch, after hearing the news, she just scoffed over the phone, asking why we were dragging ourselves off to the coast when things were fine. Do you think you can just pick up money because you're near the sea? If business were that easy, everyone in the world would be rich. I sat next to Vin, hearing every word, and my heart sank. Vin was silent for a long time before replying. We have thought it through, Mom. She retorted, thought it through and ended up drowning in bank debt? Don't come crawling back to me to complain later. My sister-in-law, Hong Nung, was even more bitter. At a paternal family memorial service, she sat among the relatives, cracking melon seeds and smirking. That couple is just dreaming. They think moving to the beach makes you a homestay owner with money flowing into your pockets. The service business isn't easy. They'll likely be in debt and crawling back home in a few years. The people around them burst into laughter. I stood in the kitchen carrying a tray, feeling my face burn as I listened, but I had to pretend I didn't hear. Our cousin Tuankoa even patted Vin on the shoulder, speaking half-jokingly. You're well-educated. Why are you so short-sighted? What will you even do there? Selling coconuts and renting out firecrackers? Those jobs are already oversaturated. How will you even break into the market? Vin just gave a faint smile and didn't answer. I knew he was hurt, but he didn't want to argue in their home. As for me, from that moment on, I silently vowed that no matter how hard it got, I would stick it out with my husband so that one day they could no longer speak of us with such contempt. The first few years in Ha Long, my husband and I lived like people racing against the waves. During the day, Vin ran everywhere looking for guests. He helped the homestay owner manage rooms, learned how to take photos, post ads, and reply to messages. At night, he would fix every light bulb, paint every peeling wall, and repair every old shelf in the house. I took on online accounting jobs, cared for little MIT, and helped my husband wash linens and clean rooms when guests stayed. There were nights we folded blankets until 1 a.m. The next morning at 5 o'clock, we were already up to go to the market for breakfast food. The sea doesn't always bring in money. There were months of continuous storms, mass cancellations, phone notifications pinging with cancellations, while the bank payments were still due like clockwork. I once sat in the kitchen, looking at a pot of plain porridge with a little minced meat, telling myself to eat simply today so we could pay the interest. Vin saw me quiet and said, as long as it takes, as long as this house is still ours." I felt my eyes sting, but I dared not cry in front of him. During those difficult times, almost no one from his side of the family asked how we were living. My mother-in-law called, and her first question wasn't about how we were or how the kids were, but, "So, have you realized how miserable you are yet? I told you so, but you wouldn't listen." There was a time Vin was exhausted, mentioning that business was slow that month and money was tight. Mrs. Bitch let out a long sigh and dropped this: "You chose it, you bear it. A man who makes his own decisions shouldn't come complaining to his mother." I remembered that sentence for a long time because it felt colder than the stormy days out at sea. Yet, after 3 years, as our business gradually stabilized, as guests started returning for Vin's clean and decent service, and as our little house began to thrive, those who once mocked us started looking at us with different eyes. They never mentioned the bitter words they had said back then. No one remembered having called us dreamers, short-sighted, or debt-ridden. They only saw a house by the sea, crowded in the summer, and naturally treated it as a common benefit for the whole family. My mother-in-law started saying, "Your house is in such a prime spot. It's so convenient for family to come and visit." Hong Nung smiled warmly. "I just said that for fun back then. Who would have thought you two would actually pull it off?" Tuan Koa changed his tune as well. "Vin, you really have vision. This year I'll come down and help you sell some seafood just for fun." They spoke so lightly, as if they had never poured buckets of cold water on us during our hardest times. I'm not bitter because they are poor, nor because they want to visit if they truly needed help. My husband and I have never been stingy. What hurts me is that this house was built with our sweat, our debts, and our sleepless nights. When we were suffering, they stood on the sidelines and laughed. When they saw it was profitable, they walked in as if it were their inherent right. And because of that, this time when Vin said each person has to pay 10 million a month, I knew he wasn't just talking about money. He was demanding the respect we had been denied for all these years. Going back to that morning, after Vin clearly stated that everyone must pay 10 million a month, the other end of the line went silent for a few seconds before immediately exploding. My mother-in-law's voice screeched so sharply that little MIT, who was coloring at the desk, was startled and looked up. "What did you say?" "I gave birth to you and raised you to be this big. Now that I come to stay with my son for a few months, you're charging me? Do you see your mother as a hotel guest?" Vin still held the phone, staying very calm. He didn't snap, wasn't rushed, and didn't dodge the issue like previous times. He just said slowly, "If you come to visit for a few days, I'll welcome you. If you want seafood, I'll take you. If you want to swim, I'll drive you. But 8 people staying for 3 months and bringing goods to sell isn't just visiting, Mom. That's using my house to live and conduct business." I stood nearby, listening to every word, feeling both anxious and pained. Anxious because I didn't know what my mother-in-law would do next. Pained because it took until now. After so many summers drained our energy, my husband and I finally dared to say what should have been said long ago. Mrs. Bitch sneered over the phone, her voice turning sarcastic. "Oh, so Dung is standing there putting you up to this, right?" I know her nature all too well. Gentle on the outside, but calculating every penny against her in-laws behind their backs. I clenched my hands tightly. In previous years, I would have stayed silent and let Vin talk to her himself. But this time, I stepped closer to the phone, trying to keep my voice calm. Quote, "Mom, for 2 years, I gave up baby Mitt's room, cleaned, cooked, paid for utilities, and washed linens for everyone. I never asked for a single cent. But this year, I am not doing it for free anymore." As soon as I finished, there was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Perhaps Mrs. Bitch didn't expect a daughter-in-law who usually never talked back to be so firm. She gritted out, "It's just a few square meters, yet you act like it's a 5-star hotel. Do you think living near the beach makes you so special?" I replied immediately, not letting myself back down. Quote, "Precisely because it's only a few square meters, it's impossible to house 11 people for 3 months. Mom, hotels charge money because they have rooms, staff, and services, whereas my house is where my daughter sleeps. It's where my husband and I work, and where my family rests after a tiring day." Vin placed the phone on the table, still leaving it on speaker. He opened a note on his device, sliding his finger across each line of data. Quote, "Mom, listen to me. Last summer, our electric bill jumped from over 2 million to nearly 7 million, the water bill doubled, and grocery expenses went up by over 30 million since we had to shop for a dozen people every day. That's not even counting the gas, laundry detergent, dish soap, toilet paper, and the bedding that needed constant washing." There was a brief silence on the other end, but Mrs. Bitch still tried to remain firm. "You're a man, yet you're recording all these trivial things in a notebook? We're family, yet you're calculating like a merchant at the market. Vin didn't lose his temper. He opened a photo on his phone, his voice deepening. Quote, "So, do you remember last year when Nung's 2 kids threw the remote and broke our TV screen? That TV cost $38 million to fix. Nung just laughed and said the kids didn't know any better. And you, did you even ask her to pay for it?" Mrs. Bitch fell completely silent. I looked at Vin, seeing his eyes redden, but his voice remained steady. He continued, "And what about Koa taking my motorbike to make deliveries, hitting a concrete pillar and scratching the whole side? When I asked him about it, he said we're family. Why worry about a little scratch?" I held my tongue, but Mom, staying silent doesn't mean I don't feel the sting. I just wanted to preserve our family ties. Mrs. Bitch's voice began to choke up. "So now you're bringing up old stories to blame me, to blame your siblings and relatives? I raised you just so you could sit there and calculate utility bills with your own mother? Later on, when you and your wife run into trouble, who will have your back? Or will you be calling on your relatives then?" That sentence sent a chill down my spine. It turned out that in her eyes, family affection was just a debt hanging over our heads, brought out whenever she needed to force someone into submission. Vin raised his head and stared straight into the empty space in front of him. He spoke very quietly, but every word felt like it hit the floor with a thud. Quote, "If having your support means you occupying my house, taking my money, making my wife suffer, and depriving my daughter of her bedroom all summer, then I'll pass." I was stunned. In all the years we've been married, it was the first time I heard my husband speak so decisively to his mother. It wasn't that he stopped loving her, but he finally realized that loving his mother couldn't mean letting his wife and child be trampled. On the other end of the line, Mrs. Bitch was gasping for air, then she burst out a string of words. "Fine, very good, you have a wife now, so you've forgotten your mother and your relatives. I'll let the whole family know how heartless you two are. Let's see if you can even hold your heads up after that." Saying that, she hung up abruptly. The phone screen went dark, but the heavy atmosphere in the room remained. I stood still for a long time, not knowing what to say. Outside the window, the summer sun had risen high. The sound of tourists on the street was still noisy. The tram carrying passengers clattered by as if it had no idea that a storm had just broken out in this small house. Vin put the phone down and rubbed his forehead. I softly asked, "Do you regret it?" He looked at me, his voice raspy. "I only regret letting you and our child suffer for so long." That statement made my eyes sting, but I knew things weren't over yet. Given Mrs. Bitch's nature, she wouldn't let it slide easily, and this year's beach trip definitely wouldn't end with a hung-up phone call. That evening, I thought after the tense phone call that morning, my mother-in-law would be quiet for a few days to reflect. At the very least, she should understand that we were no longer as easy to agree as we were the past 2 summers. But I had underestimated how cunning Mrs. Bitch was. That woman is not used to being refused. Once her son doesn't listen, she finds a way to drag the whole family into it to force him into submission. At about 8 p.m., just as I finished setting the table for dinner, my phone suddenly rang continuously. Zalo messages popped up one after another. I opened it and saw that I had just been added to a new group called Vin Dung's Beach Summer. The name of that group sent a chill down my spine. There were over 20 people in the group, all aunts, uncles, and cousins from his side of the family. People I hadn't met in ages were there, and those who had only visited our house once were also fully added. Immediately after, my mother-in-law sent the first message. She wrote it so cleverly. The words sounded friendly, but reading closely, they were full of calculation. This year, Vin's house in Ha Long is spacious and near the beach, so he and his wife are inviting the whole family down for fun. Whoever is going, sign up here, so we can arrange transportation. I stared at the words, inviting the whole family, and felt like my heart was being squeezed. Who did my husband and I invite? We had just made it clear that we couldn't host 8 people for 3 months. Yet, in Mrs. Bitch's hands, everything turned into my husband and me actively inviting them. Less than a minute later, my sister-in-law Hong Nung jumped in to respond. She immediately sent several photos of boxes stacked high in a corner. Animal-shaped floaties, wide-brimmed hats, flip-flops, sunglasses, and waterproof phone pouches. She added a message, sounding so natural. "I've prepared some items to bring down to sell for fun and make some money for seafood. Uncle Vin's house is so close to the beach, it's perfect. This year will surely be a blast." I read it and felt a bitter taste in my throat. To her, my home is no longer a home, but a convenient, free location to set up shop. Tuan Koa chimed in immediately. "Exactly, Sister Nung. Uncle Vin's house is so close to the beach, it's so convenient. Carry the goods out to sell in the morning, sleep there at night, saving so much money on rent." One aunt sent a voice message, her laughter booming through the speaker, saying how staying with family saves so much on hotel costs. It's truly a blessing for the whole clan. Another person asked if they needed to bring a charcoal grill down. Someone else asked if there was room on our ground floor for a few coolers of seafood. They chatted away as if my house had already been handed over for the whole family to use. I held my phone, my hands shaking, as images flashed in my mind. Baby Mitt's room occupied, the living room filled with mattresses, the ground floor piled with goods, the stove always burning, and me silently cleaning up after everyone. But what hurt me most this time was how my mother-in-law sat silently, watching everyone pile on. She didn't correct them by saying we hadn't agreed. On the contrary, she would occasionally drop a comment that added fuel to the fire. Quote, "Everyone, please register early so I can tell Vin and his wife to prepare sleeping arrangements." I turned to look at Vin. He was sitting at the dining table, his phone screen lighting up repeatedly. Strangely, he wasn't getting angry. He just watched the messages scroll by, his expression growing colder by the second. I asked quietly, "Are you not going to say anything? If we let Mom write that, then when we refuse later, the whole family will say we've turned on them." Vin set his bowl down, wiped his hands, and said softly, "Take screenshots of everything." I was stunned. Why take screenshots? He looked at me, his voice low but firm. "This year, we're not arguing with words. If we speak, they'll call us rude, calculating, and heartless. Let's just let them reveal their true intentions themselves." With that, he took my phone and showed me how to save every message, every photo of the merchandise, and every comment about saving on room costs, avoiding the cost of a kiosk, using my house as their storage space. Before I could fully process it, Vin opened his laptop and logged into a social media sales page. On the screen appeared the words, "Ms. Nung's Beachwear near the beach." I stared at the name, my heart pounding in my chest. Below it was a series of posts selling waterproof bags, sunglasses, swim rings, plastic sandals, and beach cover-ups. What left me speechless was the address for returns and exchanges. Every shipment was marked with my exact home address. I stammered, "How long has this been going on?" Vin scrolled down to the older posts. His voice was tight. "Since last summer. He discovered it after some strangers came to the house asking to pick up their orders. At first, he thought Ms. Nung had just made a mistake. Later, he realized she was using our house as a permanent sales hub. The entire summer, she sold goods online and directly in front of the beach. Our home was their warehouse, their bedroom, and their business address, and she didn't even offer us a penny." I felt a chill run through my body. For the past 2 years, I thought we were just being inconvenienced by them staying over. I never imagined there was a whole hidden business built on my husband's and my patience. I recalled the boxes stacked high on the first floor, the strangers standing at our door, and the times Hong Nung laughed it off, claiming she was just selling things for fun. It turns out that casual side business already had a shop name, an address, regular customers, and revenue. The only ones who didn't know were us, the homeowners. Vin closed his laptop, his gaze darkening. He had been watching to see how far they would go. He thought if they were reasonable this year, he'd speak clearly and that would be the end of it. But as you can see, Mom not only didn't stop, she even dragged the whole family in to pressure us. And Nung is stocking up on goods as if this house were her own. I looked at my husband, realizing for the first time that his silence lately wasn't exactly weakness. Perhaps he had been hurt and angry too. He just chose to wait until everything was perfectly clear. Right at that moment, Vin's phone lit up with a private message from my mother-in-law. She wrote briefly but with a heavy sense of imposition. "I've already told the whole family, and the tickets are booked. Next week when we arrive, you'd better have the house ready. Don't make me lose face." Vin read it and handed the phone to me. I looked at those words, no longer feeling afraid, only a deep sense of coldness. They aren't asking to stay, they've already planned to descend upon us whether we agree or not. And from that moment on, I knew this summer would no longer be a summer of forbearance. It would be the time my husband and I had to reclaim our home before family ties were used as an excuse to cross every line. After the message about coming next week, I thought they would at least have enough self-respect to wait for our clear response. After all, this is our private home, not a village square or a community hall that anyone can enter as they please. Vin also told me that night to stay calm, saying if they were truly reasonable, they would call back to discuss it. But I forgot that for people who are used to taking our silence as a free pass, they don't need permission, they only need to show up. At exactly 5 a.m. on Sunday, while it was still misty by the sea, I was startled awake by the sound of thunderous pounding on the door downstairs. At first, I thought it was an emergency, but right after came the sound of people calling out, echoing through the entire alley. Vin, dung! Open the door, the whole family is here. Prolonged shouts mixed with the sound of children screeching, the clatter of suitcase wheels, and bus drivers urging each other to unload the luggage. I bolted upright, my heart pounding. Vin also woke up with a start. Before he could say anything, the gate was pounded on even harder. I rushed to pull back the curtain and look down. In front of my gate stood two 16-seater vans, headlights still blaring in the early morning. Suitcases, styrofoam boxes, red and blue sacks, and cardboard boxes as tall as a person completely packed the sidewalk. My limbs went cold at the sight. They actually came. No call beforehand, no asking, and no need for our consent. In the middle of that mountain of luggage, my mother-in-law, Mrs. Bitch, stood with her hands on her hips like a commander. She wore a purple floral outfit, a wide-brimmed hat, phone in hand, constantly barking orders to put that box of swimming floats against the wall. Quote, "Don't let the sun hit the boxes of sunglasses, take them to the second floor where it's cool. Bring the dried food into the kitchen, don't leave it out here or the ants will swarm." That posture didn't look like someone visiting their son's house. It looked like a warehouse owner moving in a shipment. She was holding up her phone to live stream. Her voice rang out clearly from the screen. Quote, "Hey everyone, this year my whole big family is headed to Ha Long for a 3-month summer vacation. My younger brother's house is right by the beach. It's super convenient. Anyone who needs beach gear, I'll be posting items soon." My chest tightened as I listened. Even now, she was still nonchalantly using my house to advertise as if it were her own property. Before I could go down to open the door, a strange clattering sound echoed from below. Vin's face changed color, and he rushed to the stairs before me. As we reached the first floor, I froze to see Tuan Koa already standing inside the courtyard. He was grinning from ear to ear, having just opened the side gate. Quote, "Good thing I still kept the spare key from last year. You guys wouldn't come down no matter how much I called. The drivers have to go on other trips, you know." Hearing that, the blood rushed to my head. It turns out that last year when he asked for the key to go buy things at night, he had secretly kept it until now. As soon as the gate opened, the whole crowd poured in. Some carried suitcases, some hugged boxes, and children swarmed up the stairs like they were at a festival. Shoes covered in sand and mud trampled all over the floor I had just mopped last night. One of Hong Nung's kids held a lollipop, smearing it against the wall while running. Another one cheered, "I'll sleep in Mitt's room. That room has teddy bears." With that, it dashed straight up to the 3rd floor. Little MIT was awakened by the noise. She walked out of the room clutching her teddy bear, hair messy, looking bewildered. She saw her cousins had already climbed onto her bed, jumping up and down. Terrified, she ran downstairs and hugged my leg tightly. Quote, "Mom, why are they in my room?" That question felt like a needle pricking my heart. I knelt down to hug her, but my eyes remained on the people freely hauling their things into my house. What infuriated me most was that they weren't just bringing clothes or personal items. Each crate was pried open, revealing sunglasses racks, sealing machines, mini speakers, flashlights, children's life jackets, waterproof bags, plastic sandals, and sun hats. Someone even shouted, "Where is the QR code scanner?" Don't mix it in with the suitcases of clothes. In less than 20 minutes, my first floor had turned into a chaotic warehouse, just like a wholesale market. Hong Nung carried a box of waterproof bags and placed it right at the foot of the stairs. She turned to me with a fake smile. Quote, "I know you're meticulous, so this year I packed everything neatly in boxes. If I make some sales, I'll chip in a little for the utilities for fun." That, "for fun," comment made me feel sick. In the last 2 years, she hasn't voluntarily paid a single cent. Now that we've spoken up, she uses "chip in for fun" to mask her own shamelessness. I was about to speak when Mrs. Bitch cut in, her voice icy. "We're all family. It's early in the morning, don't be tense. Everyone heading to the beach brings a lot of gear. Just leave it there and we'll sort it out later." I looked at her, one question in my mind. Since when did I become someone who has to ask for permission to have peace in my own home? Right then, Vin stepped onto the stairs, surveying the house that had been turned upside down. His expression was colder than I had ever seen. He didn't yell or slam the table, just asked one very clear question. "Who gave you all permission to enter my house?" The entire living room froze. The kids were still making noise upstairs, but the adults fell silent. They probably didn't expect Vin to be so blunt. Every other year he endured, scrambled to make arrangements, and told me to hang in there to keep his mother happy. But this morning, he stood right there in his own home, like someone who had finally pulled a thorn out of his heart after all this time. Mrs. Bitch was the first to react. She slammed her bag onto the table, her eyes widening. A mother's house is a son's house, isn't it? Do I need permission to come stay with my own son? Or is it that, now you're married, this house belongs only to Dung? That remark deliberately dragged me into the middle of the battle. I knew she wanted to turn this into a mother-in-law versus daughter-in-law conflict, to soften Vin's heart and get everyone to start blaming me. But Vin only gave a cold smile. He replied, one word at a time. This house is registered under our names. The monthly bank loan is also paid by the two of us. If Mom wants to visit, I'll welcome you, but wanting to bring 8 people and a mountain of cargo to stay for 3 months requires a clear discussion. No one has the right to just let themselves into my house like that. Upon hearing that, Tuan Koa fumbled to hide the key in his pocket. But I saw it, and Vin saw it too. His gaze lingered on Koa's hand for a few seconds, cold enough that he had to look away. Hong Nung gave a forced laugh. Why is Uncle Vin so tense? We just arrived, haven't even had breakfast, and you're interrogating us like the police. Vin turned to his sister, his voice still level but sharp. If you come to visit, I'll treat you to a meal. If you come to stay, I'll quote a price. But if you come to use my house as a warehouse, I do not agree. The atmosphere in the house grew thick and suffocating. I held little MIT close, clearly feeling her tiny hands trembling. Meanwhile, in front of me, those who had just trespassed stood in the middle of the room as if they were the owners. That morning, I realized everything had gone beyond the concept of staying as guests. This was no longer a matter of an extra mattress or a few more meals. This is a fight to see if this house belongs to my small family or to the greed masked as family affection by my husband's relatives. Less than an hour after invading the house, Hong Nung's facade of visiting for the sake of family fun had completely vanished. She didn't ask where to put her things, didn't ask if she was bothering our daily life, and showed none of the hesitation typical of a guest staying in someone else's home. She stood in the middle of the first floor with her hands on her hips, ordering her 2 sons to open every box as if they were setting up a market stall. Label the waterproof bag bin at 35,000. Keep the sunglasses separate. 40 for kids sizes, 60 for adults. Don't mix the animal-shaped floats with the regular ones. It'll be easier to sort later. Hong Nung's voice rang out shrilly. Her eldest son held a stack of pre-printed price tags, peeling off tape to stick them onto the boxes. The younger one chewed on a snack while pulling bags of merchandise out and throwing them onto the floor. Standing on the stairs, watching my house turn into a beach gear stall in the blink of an eye, I felt a tightness in my chest. What stunned me even more was that she hadn't just brought inventory. Hong Nung pulled a small receipt printer, a QR scanner, and a rolled-up banner from her suitcase. Seeing this, Tuan Koa excitedly ran over to help roll it out. The blue banner displayed giant text, beach gear at wholesale prices, discounts for bulk purchases. Looking at those words, my scalp went numb. This was no longer just a stay, nor was it just selling things for fun to afford seafood. They had prepared as if they were launching a full-scale business operation. Tuan Koa held the QR scanner up to his cousins, laughing loudly. No need to rent a kiosk this year. Places near the beach charge nearly 100 million a season, but Vin's place is cool, provides a place to sleep, and has storage for goods. What a steal. That statement hit me like a slap in the face. It turns out, in their calculations, my home isn't a place for relatives to stay, but a cost to be cut. My husband's and my patience was being converted into their profit. I turned to look at Vin. He stood by the tea table, his face expressionless, but his jaw was clenched tight. I knew he was trying to stay calm. After all, his own mother, sister, and relatives were right there. But every word they spoke was exposing the true nature of this trip. They didn't come down to visit my family at all. They came down to take over the space, the utilities, the bedrooms, and even the peace my husband and I had worked so hard for years to build. It didn't stop there. Hong Nung turned to me with a commanding tone. Quote, Dung, you have a stainless steel table in your auxiliary kitchen, right? I'll put a pot of boiling sausages there in a bit. Tourists coming back from the beach love to buy them in the evening. Since you work from home all day, you can just keep an eye on the pot and call me when customers come. I looked at her, almost unable to believe my own ears. Not only did she want to use my house as a warehouse, she also intended to use my kitchen as a food stall, and turn me into her unpaid shop assistant. I was just about to speak when my mother-in-law interrupted from the living room. Quote, "It's just a pot of sausages, why make such a fuss? Dung works from home anyway, she's not going anywhere. What's the harm in helping your sister-in-law a little? We're family, we should help each other out." Hearing that from my mother-in-law, Hong Nung felt even more emboldened. She smirked, looking me up and down as if I were the unreasonable one. The tipping point was when Hong Nung grabbed a bag of clothes and headed straight to the third floor. I thought she was looking for a place to put her suitcase, but she pushed open Mitt's door and started rummaging through my daughter's closet. MIT was standing next to me, and seeing that, she immediately ran upstairs. I reached the door just in time to hear Hong Nung say, "This room is airy, it makes sense for the 3 kids to sleep here. Just fold Mitt's clothes into a corner. What's the big deal with the kids sharing for a few months?" MIT burst into tears immediately. She pulled my hand, her voice choked up, "Mom, this is my room. Why is she taking my room again?" Her words made my heart ache. 2 summers ago, I had forced her to give up her room, thinking she was young and a little coaxing would be enough. But it turns out children remember everything. They just didn't know how to resist back then. Hong Nung turned around, and seeing my child crying, she didn't feel embarrassed at all, she just scoffed. Quote, "What do kids know? They can sleep anywhere. MIT is just spoiled by her parents, that's why she's so selfish." Hearing the word, selfish, something in my mind just snapped. I walked straight into the room and pulled the closet door shut in front of my daughter. For the first time, I looked my sister-in-law straight in the eyes and enunciated, "Get out of my daughter's room." The entire hallway went silent. Hong Nung froze for a few seconds, then immediately changed her expression. Quote, "My goodness, I'm not a thief. Why are you being so harsh? I was just arranging sleeping spots for the kids." I retorted immediately, "My house is not a warehouse, nor is it a dormitory. My child's room is not a place anyone can just barge into." My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for everyone downstairs to hear. Mrs. Bitch immediately rushed up the stairs, shrieking as she climbed. Quote, "Do you all see this? She treats her own relatives like beggars. The kids in the family just want to stay over, and she won't even give them a room. Daughters-in-law these days are becoming more and more terrifying." I held little MIT close, feeling her still sobbing with every breath. At that moment, I was no longer afraid of being gossiped about. If saving face for adults means letting my child be hurt, then that reputation isn't worth a dime. Just as the atmosphere was stretched tight like a rubber band, a constant knocking suddenly sounded at the gate. It wasn't the chattering of relatives, but a firm, steady knocking. Vin went down to open the door. 2 men in urban management uniforms stood outside, one holding a notebook, the other looking into the house where boxes were piled high on the ground floor. The older one asked, "Who is the homeowner here? We received reports of signs of goods being stockpiled and unregistered business activities in a private residence." Hong Nung, standing on the stairs, heard this, and her face instantly turned pale. Tuan Koa, downstairs, frantically pushed some boxes further inside, muttering, "Oh no, who reported this so fast?" I turned to look at my husband. Vin remained calm, even pouring a glass of water and setting it on the table as if he knew this would happen sooner or later. He invited the 2 officials inside, clarifying that this is his and his wife's private home. Those goods do not belong to his family, and he does not consent to any business being conducted at this address. Hong Nung stood nearby, her lips trembling, but she still tried to argue. Quote, "I'm just storing a few things, I haven't sold anything yet." After a preliminary inspection and a clear warning, the 2 officers left, demanding that the house not be used for illegal business or to store goods that compromise residential safety. The moment the door closed, Hong Nung lunged into the center of the living room, eyes flashing. "Who reported us? Who called them here?" Vin set his glass on the table, looked straight at his sister, his lips curling coldly. "I reported it." The whole family gasped. Mrs. Bitch pointed a finger at her son's face, her voice trembling with rage. Quote, "Are you turning against your own family because of this woman?" Vin didn't avoid his mother's gaze, replying clearly, "No one is playing anyone. It's everyone who is taking advantage of me." That statement left the whole house stunned into silence. As for me, standing beside my daughter, for the first time in years, I felt that our home still had someone to defend it. After the 2 urban management officers left, the already cramped house felt even more suffocating. No one dared to openly unpack the boxes like before, but no one had any intention of moving them either. The boxes of life jackets, sunglasses, and waterproof bags remained piled high on the first floor, sitting there like living proof of their shamelessness. I carried my daughter up to the room to wash her face, but my ears could still hear every whisper from downstairs. A while later, the whole extended family gathered in the living room. They didn't call us down, but they spoke loudly enough for us to hear. I stood halfway up the stairs, looking down through the railing. Hong Nung flopped onto the sofa, face flushed, phone still in her hand. She gritted her teeth and said, "He really intends to kick the whole family out. Did you all see that? It's just a few boxes of goods and he calls urban management to threaten us." Tuan Koa, sitting next to her, kicked a box at his feet in frustration. "It's unbearable, so embarrassing. On our very first day, we're being inspected like we're smugglers. What dignity do we have left for the whole neighborhood to see?" An aunt clucked her tongue. "It's all Dung's fault. Vin used to be so gentle. He never stood up to his relatives before. Hearing my name, I could only find it laughable. Whenever something goes wrong, they always need someone to blame. And that person is none other than the daughter-in-law, always." Mrs. Bitch sat in the middle of the sofa, face dark, hands clutching her handbag in front of her. At first she was silent, but her eyes darted from one person to another, as if waiting for the right moment. Seeing her mother say nothing, Hong Nung burst into loud sobs. "Look, mother, your daughter is being humiliated by her brother and sister-in-law in front of everyone. I just brought the goods down to earn some extra money. I didn't take from anyone, yet she had the heart to call people to inspect me." Mrs. Bitch let out a long sigh, then suddenly, she clutched her chest and slumped back into the seat. "Oh, it hurts so much, I can't breathe." Her groans echoed, instantly throwing the whole living room into chaos. An aunt shouted out, "Oh no, what's wrong with Mrs. Bitch?" Hong Nung rushed over to hold her mother's shoulders, screaming, "Mom, don't scare me like this. It's all their fault, they provoked you." I stood on the stairs, my heart skipping a beat. No matter how angry I am at her, I am still a human being. Seeing an elderly person clutching their chest and groaning, I couldn't help but feel worried. But just a few seconds after I intended to step down, I suddenly saw Mrs. Bitch peek open her eyes. It was very quick, but enough for me to catch it. Her eyes showed no panic or pain. They were observing. Observing how Vin would react. Observing if I was scared. Observing if the whole family was siding with her. Little MIT ran out of the room, and seeing her grandmother lying on the sofa, she fearfully hid behind my back. The little girl whispered, "Mom, is Grandma okay?" I held my child's shoulder, and before I could answer, an aunt downstairs pointed straight at me. What kind of daughter-in-law lets her mother-in-law get so angry she needs the hospital? In other families, they are blessed to have a daughter-in-law who treats her mother-in-law like her own, but this house is truly cursed. Hong Nung heard this and cried even louder, tears and snot streaming, but her voice remained razor-sharp. "If anything happens to Mom, you two will be wicked for the rest of your lives. I just want you two to know if that pile of goods is worth Mom's life." That statement immediately pulled the entire living room to one side. Some people blamed Vin for being ungrateful, some said I was too harsh, and others urged us to call an ambulance. But strangely, no one actually ran to get medicine or call a doctor. Everyone just stood there, using Mrs. Bitch's heart pain as a whip to lash out at us. Vin walked up from the first floor to the living room. He looked at his mother lying on the sofa, looked at Hong Nung crying, and then looked at me. His face wasn't as panicked as everyone had expected. He just took out his phone and opened the home security camera app. Seeing this, Hong Nung shouted, "How can you be looking at your phone right now? Mom is in pain and about to die." Vin didn't answer. He rewound the living room camera footage by just a few minutes, clearly showing Mrs. Bitch eating jackfruit and laughing heartily. She even told Hong Nung to let her do the talking later. Quote, "You just need to cry loudly. Once Vin sees his mother in pain, he'll soften up immediately." The whole room went dead silent. Hong Nung's crying cut off as if someone had choked her. The aunt who was just pointing at me also froze, her eyes glued to the screen. Vin placed the phone on the table, his voice so cold it gave me goosebumps. Quote, "Have you finished your act, Mom?" Mrs. Bitch jumped up almost instantly, her face flushed red, not knowing if it was out of anger or shame, but instead of bowing her head, she slammed her hand on the chair and yelled, "Yes, I was faking it. I wanted to see if you two had any humanity left. Your mother is lying there and you're checking cameras. I truly gave birth to an unfilial son." For the first time in my life, I saw Vin slam his hand hard against the table. That sound made everyone jump. He looked straight at his mother, each word as heavy as stone. Quote, "Humanity isn't something for you to act with, and it's certainly not something for everyone to use to pressure my wife." No one could say a word. Vin turned and pointed straight down at the pile of goods on the first floor. Quote, "For the past 2 years, you all have been using my house to make money. I pay for the utilities, and my daughter's bedroom has been taken over. My wife cleans up after you all, and you haven't paid a single penny. Yet today, you even dragged more stock down here as if this house were a free warehouse." Hong Nung immediately stiffened her neck to argue back. "Oh, come on, I don't even sell that much. Why are you being so dramatic? I'm just trying to earn a little grocery money and snacks for the kids. Vin gave a cold smile and opened another photo folder on his phone. He showed the screen to everyone. It was a screenshot of Hong Nung's Facebook post. She had boasted that she made over 300 million each summer selling beach gear, just by knowing how to utilize a prime location. The whole family turned to look at Hong Nung. Some gasped in shock, others looked away. Mrs. Bitch was also stunned, as she had just defended her daughter by claiming she only made a little pocket money. I stood by the stairs, finally realizing that Vin hadn't been passive. He had quietly gathered everything, not for revenge, but for when it was needed. The truth speaks for itself. Vin continued, his voice slow but clear. No one forbids earning money through hard work, but using someone else's house as free capital and others, patience as profit isn't business, it's exploitation. The living room fell into a suffocating silence. The facade of loving relatives, affectionate mother and child, and supportive sisters was finally torn apart. Before me, it was no longer just a family trip, but pure greed brought to light. After being exposed by Vin for making hundreds of millions by using our house as a free warehouse, Hong Nung could no longer cry. She sat silently in the corner of the sofa, her face turning red and white, her hands gripping her phone tightly. I thought that with the truth so clear, she would at least be ashamed enough to clear out some of her goods or stay quiet to save a shred of dignity. But I was wrong. For people used to living deceitfully, when they can't win with tears, they will try to win with slander. That afternoon, when the sun from the sea made the road glare white, I was in the kitchen prepping vegetables for Little Mitt's dinner when my phone kept buzzing. At first, I didn't pay attention, thinking it was just family group messages, but then it was the neighbor next door. Ms. Han messaged me privately. Quote, "Dung, have you seen Facebook yet? What's going on at your place? People are making such a scene." My heart suddenly tightened. I quickly wiped my hands on a towel and checked my phone. The first post that appeared right before my eyes was from Hong Nung. She posted a photo of her youngest son sitting outside my gate. Beside him was a small suitcase and a yellow beach hat. The angle was taken so cleverly, it looked as if the boy had been abandoned out in the sun, with my gate, house number, and part of the alley clearly visible behind him. The caption above it made my blood run cold. Some people get rich and then look down on their relatives and elderly mothers. Even a child coming to play at the beach is kicked out into the street in the midday sun. Life is so cruel. In less than an hour, the post already had hundreds of likes and dozens of comments. Those who didn't know the story cursed my husband and me for being heartless, while distant acquaintances from my husband's side jumped on the bandwagon. This kind of daughter-in-law is terrifying, rich and forgetting her roots. What's the point of having a house near the beach if you won't let your family stay? Some people were even more vicious. People like this will probably be abandoned on the street by their own children when they get old. I read every sentence with trembling hands, my eyes stinging with indignation. I had never felt so dragged out into the public square without a chance to explain myself. The most malicious thing was that Hong Nung intentionally omitted the fact that she had brought goods down to sell. She didn't mention that Tuan Koa had opened the gate himself with a key he'd secretly kept. She didn't mention my mother-in-law faking a heart attack to pressure her son. She chose just one photo with a child, a suitcase, and the gate to turn herself into a victim. The boy in the photo actually only sat there for a few minutes because Hong Nung told him to pose for her to take the shot. But online, a perfectly cropped photo was enough to turn me into a cruel woman. That afternoon when I went to the end of the alley to buy some scallions, several acquaintances looked at me with very different eyes. Some people stopped talking as soon as they saw me approach. A lady selling drinks nearby even muttered loud enough to be heard, "You should leave yourself a way out when you live your life." The child didn't do anything wrong. Hearing that felt like rubbing salt in my wounds. I wanted to go back and explain, to say that no one kicked the child out, that his own mother was using him as an excuse to smear me. But my throat was choked up. There are times when the truth is in your hands, yet you cannot speak it to a crowd that wants to believe the worst. When little MIT got home from tutoring, she burst into tears the moment she walked through the door. I panicked and asked her what was wrong. She sobbed, "Mom, Ben asked me if it's true that you kicked Grandma and the baby out on the street. He said you're mean." I held her in my arms, my heart shattering. Grown-ups fight over petty things. In the end, the hurt falls upon a child. I can endure the relatives' insults and the neighbors' glares, but I cannot bear my daughter carrying shame that isn't hers. I was trembling with rage, grabbing my phone to write a response immediately. I wanted to post all the camera footage, the receipts, and the family group chat messages for everyone to see Hong Nung's true face. But Vin stepped forward and gently held my hand. He spoke very softly but firmly, saying that now, more than ever, we must not lose control. They are waiting for you to snap so they can call you cruel and sharp-tongued. We will strike back, but it must be at the right time. That night, the whole clan seemed to be deliberately provoking us. They all went out for seafood together. They didn't return until nearly 10 p.m., everyone's faces flushed from drinking beer, laughing and shouting from the alley all the way into the house. As soon as Hong Nung crossed the threshold, she glanced at me and sneered. "Oh, the lady of the house isn't asleep yet? I thought you'd sleep soundly after kicking your guests out." I didn't answer. Vin didn't answer either. He just pulled me and little MIT upstairs. But they wouldn't stop. Near 11 p.m., Tuan Koa dragged a mini karaoke speaker into the yard and blasted music. The sound hammered against the walls, shaking the glass windows. The kids ran up and down the stairs screaming as if they were in a playground. Little MIT lay on the bed with her hands over her ears, her eyes red. As I comforted her, I felt my patience being stretched to its absolute limit. A while later, our neighbor, Mr. Fong, came over to knock on the door and remind them. He spoke very gently, saying that since there are children in the house, they should let them rest. This isn't an area for singing and noise. Hong Nung immediately laughed mockingly. "Please understand, sir, my sister-in-law is difficult, so the neighbors hate us too. We're just used to a happy, simple life in the countryside." That remark both blamed me and intentionally belittled how my family lives in front of outsiders. I stood on the stairs and heard it clearly, but Vin held my hand and shook his head. Then he quietly went up to his office and locked the door. I didn't know what he was doing in there. Downstairs, the sound of laughter continued to ring out. Hong Nung sat in the middle of the living room like a victor, scrolling through comments on her phone and laughing every now and then. See, people online have more common sense than the people in this house. I looked at her and clearly saw the gloating in her eyes. She believed that as long as public opinion was on her side, my husband and I wouldn't dare do anything. About an hour later, Vin opened his office door and walked down. In his hands was a neatly clipped stack of papers, and his phone had several clips ready to play. He placed everything on the dining table and called me over. I looked down, my heart pounding. It was a collection of all of Hong Nung's sales posts from the past 2 years. Every season, every product model, and every shipping address was our house. There were even screenshots of bank statements from customers, posts bragging about revenue, and messages setting up pickups at our front door. Not only that, Vin also pulled up a security camera clip. In the clip, Tuan Koa stood right in front of the gate, taking cash from a group of customers and handing them bags of goods from inside the house. Our house number was clearly visible in the background. I looked at my husband, my throat tightening. "What are you planning to do?" Vin looked down at the living room, where Hong Nung was still gloating over her phone. His voice was very low, but every word was cold and sharp. "If they want to take this online, I'll make them truly famous." After speaking, he gathered the papers and put them into a blue folder. I understood that the biggest trap wasn't in the back and forth insults. It lay in the evidence that Hong Nung didn't realize she had left behind herself for 2 years. The next morning, I woke up with a strange, heavy feeling. I barely slept the entire night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Hong Nung's post. Seeing the frightened look on little Mit's face when her friend asked if her mom was a bad person. But contrary to my inner turmoil, Vin was strangely calm. He woke up very early, made coffee, sat in his office reviewing the blue file, then came downstairs as if nothing had happened. Downstairs, my husband's relatives were still eating breakfast noisily. The children were crowded around the table, eating bread and dropping crumbs all over the floor. Hong Nung leaned back in her chair, scrolling on her phone, occasionally chuckling as she read comments defending her online. Tuan Koa yawned, still grumbling about being reprimanded by the city inspectors yesterday. As for my mother-in-law, Mrs. Bitch, she sat at the head of the table like a grand mistress, stone-faced, not even bothering to look at me. I had just set down Mit's bowl of porridge when a car horn suddenly honked outside the gate. Then 2 honks, then several more in a row. The atmosphere in the house suddenly froze. Hong Nung frowned, stood up, and pulled the curtain to look outside. In just a second, her face turned deathly pale. I also looked out. In front of our gate, 3 cars were parked right against the sidewalk. Stepping out of the cars were the local police, market surveillance officers, and two people in business attire holding briefcases, obviously tax officials. Hong Nung took 2 steps back, her lips trembling. Quote, Why are there so many? Tuan Koa, still holding half a loaf of bread, jumped up in shock at the sight of the uniforms, his eyes darting toward the first floor. Where several boxes were still piled in disarray, he quickly bent down to grab a carton of sunglasses to hide in a corner, but the gate opened, an officer stepped in, and with a firm voice, asked everyone to stay where they were. Who is the head of the household here? Vin stepped forward. I am Quang Vin, the head of the household along with my wife. The officer nodded, presented their credentials, and stated, We have received reports that this address is being used as a staging point for trading a large volume of unregistered goods, with signs of using the homeowner's personal information to receive shipments. We need to conduct an inspection and work with the relevant individuals. Hearing the mention of using personal information, Hong Nung froze as if someone had grabbed her by the throat. Tuan Koa still tried to hug the box and retreat up the stairs, but a local police officer immediately blocked him, saying, Put it down. The work isn't finished. No one is allowed to move the goods. Koa gave a forced smile. I was just tidying up, officer. The officer looked straight at him. Tidy up another time. Keep everything as it is for now. That short sentence made Tuan Koa lower his head and set the box down on the floor. Within just a few minutes, the entire first floor of my house was being inspected. The boxes were opened one by one, revealing sunglasses with famous brand labels but flimsy packaging. There were no import invoices, and the children's life jackets lacked quality inspection stamps. Waterproof bags were packed in batches, with no secondary labels in Vietnamese. Some plastic sandals and wide-brimmed hats were still in their original bundles. The sacks were plastered with shipping codes from sources of unknown origin. The more they inspected, the paler Hong Nung's face became. She offered a twisted smile. Quote, Officer, I only sell small, retail items. It's summer. Doesn't everyone sell a few extra things? A tax official opened the file in his hand and said in a cold but clear voice, Retail, yet the revenue transferred to your account over 3 months last summer was over 700 million? It felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the living room. The relatives who were watching immediately turned to look at Hong Nung. Mrs. Bitch was also stunned, her eyes wide with disbelief. She stammered, You earned that much money, but told your mother you only sold trinkets and couldn't afford to rent a kiosk? Hong Nung opened her mouth, but couldn't utter a single word. She looked to Tuan Koa for help, but he just kept his head hung low. Those cold figures shattered the earning a little pocket money facade she had used to deceive the whole family. I stood next to little MIT, my hand resting on her shoulder. At that moment, I didn't feel gloating, I only felt sad. Sad because for so many summer months my child had to lose her room, and my family lost its peace. All for someone else to make money and then turn around and call us ungrateful. Right at that moment, Vin took another stack of papers from his briefcase and placed them on the table. These were all the receipts for electricity, water, furniture repairs, and incidental costs from the past 2 summers. He flipped through the pages, his voice not loud but echoing clearly in the dead silent room. Here's the extra electricity bill, the water bill, and the invoice for the TV your child broke. Here's the repair bill for the bike after Koa took it for deliveries and got into a crash. For 2 years you've used my house to make hundreds of millions, while my daughter has to cram into bed with us. No one could say a word. Vin's last sentence cut straight through their facade. Mrs. Bitch looked down at the stack of bills, then back at Hong Nung. Mrs. Tung had defended her daughter, saying she just sold things for fun to earn some extra pocket money. Now, she too was slapped in the face by the truth. But instead of admitting fault, she turned to Vin, trembling. Even if your sister is wrong, she's still your sister. How could you bear to take things this far? Vin looked at his mother, his eyes turning red. Mom, do you know? Last year, I already talked to Nung privately. I told her not to use my home address for her sales anymore. Don't let strangers come to the house, and don't turn my home into a warehouse. She promised she would stop. But not only did she not stop, she even used my ID card photo to register shipping orders, using my name as the recipient for easier transport. I turned to my husband in shock. I had never even heard that detail in full. Vin continued, That is why I've had to silently gather evidence these past few months. I didn't do it to hurt anyone, I did it to protect my own family. Because if the goods were faulty, if customers sued, or if authorities investigated, I would be the first one held responsible. Only then did Hong Nung truly panic. She burst into tears, but this time her crying wasn't sharp like yesterday, it was trembling with fear. I only borrowed your information temporarily. I thought it was no big deal since we're family. Vin cut her off. Being family doesn't give you the right to use my identity for your business. After verifying the documents, the authorities drew up an on-site report. Several boxes of goods were sealed because no invoices could be produced. Evidence. Hong Nung and Tuan Koa were summoned to explain the origin of the goods, their revenue, and the use of the address. Misuse of personal information. Hearing that, Mrs. Bitch was truly stunned. She clutched Vin's arm, tears streaming down. Vin, please save your sister. She's just foolish. Don't let them take her away, I beg you. Vin stood still for a long time without a word, then gently pulled her hand away. His voice was raspy but cold to the core. When she was profiting off my wife's back, did anyone think about my family? Mrs. Bitch was struck silent. Hong Nung was led to the car under the panicked gaze of the entire family. Tuan Koa followed dejectedly, stripped of the arrogance he had shown just that morning. The gate closed, and the house was finally strangely quiet, but looking at my mother-in-law's pale face and hateful glare, I knew the real storm wasn't over. She had both lost face and watched her daughter exposed before all our relatives. And for someone like Mrs. Bitch, that humiliation would certainly not be swallowed in silence. After Hong Nung and Tuan Koa were taken in for questioning, our house fell into a strange kind of silence. It wasn't the relief of calm after a storm, but the heavy stillness before another one arrives. The remaining relatives sat scattered in the living room, some on their phones making pleas, others whispering accusations. The way they looked at us was no longer just annoyed, but as if we had committed an unforgivable sin. An aunt, having just finished a call, turned to hint, "Couldn't you have kept this within the family? Family members acting this way, calling the authorities to the house. How are you supposed to face us later?" Another uncle sighed and shook his head. If Nung was wrong, advise her. If Koa was foolish, scold him. But pushing family into a corner like this, I find you two quite heartless. I stood by the dining table, listening to every word with a bitter sense of irony. When they use my home as a way to make money, no one spoke of kinship. But when the truth is exposed, kinship becomes a cloak to shield wrongdoing. Mrs. Bitch sat in the middle of the living room, her face pale but her eyes bloodshot with rage. She no longer wore the gentle, moral mask of a mother who once claimed she only moved in because she cared for her children and grandchildren. Before me stood a woman whose pride had been wounded, who had lost control, and was looking for someone to pour all her shame onto. She didn't ask how long Hong Nung had been using my house for business. She also didn't ask why Tuan Koa kept my house keys without returning them. She only glared at Vin. As if every fault in this world was caused by him. Quote, "Are you satisfied now?" Her voice was raspy. She said his sister had been cited, his cousin called in for questioning, and the whole family was losing face here. What you did is no different than cutting off your sister's hand. Vin stood facing his mother, his arms hanging limp at his sides. I saw his shoulders tremble slightly. I couldn't tell if from anger or pain, but his voice when he replied was strangely cold. She made money using my house, at the expense of my wife's comfort and my daughter's bedroom. I didn't cut anyone's hand off. I just took back my own home. That statement was like a spark thrown into a barrel of oil. Mrs. Bitch jumped up and slammed her hand onto the tea table, making the glasses rattle. Since the day you married, you have changed completely. You used to love your mother so much, but now you only listen to Dung. Whatever she says, you obey. She tells you to kick someone out, you kick them out. She tells you to charge someone, you charge them. Do you even consider me your mother anymore? I stood still and didn't intervene. I knew this moment was no longer just about me. This was a long-standing rift between Vin and his mother. A rift that Mrs. Bitch had long blamed on me just to avoid facing the truth. Vin looked at his mother for a long time and said, "Mother, stop dragging Dung into everything. From beginning to end, I am the one who made the decisions." Mrs. Bitch scoffed, her smile both bitter and resentful. "You decided? If you had really decided, you would have bought me a house here back then. You bought a house near the sea, you took out bank loans, you did everything for your wife and children. But what about your mother? I told you I wanted a small place nearby to live out my old age, so when I'm sick, I'd be close to my children and grandchildren. Did you listen? Or maybe when your wife says there's no money, you immediately push your mother aside." Her words left me stunned. That story had indeed happened. A few months after we moved to Ha Long, Mrs. Bitch came to visit and saw the coast getting crowded, noticing small houses nearby being turned into homestays. She hinted to Vin, "Why don't you buy me a small place next door? I'm lonely in the countryside. I can come here later to watch the grandkids and help you with business." At that time, we were drowning in debt. Money from selling the car and our savings only covered the deposit for our current house, and the monthly bank payments were suffocating us. I remember explaining it very honestly, "Mom, we can barely take care of ourselves. This house is mortgaged and work isn't stable yet, but when we're better off, we'll make sure to provide for you properly." I didn't say that just to brush her off, but because we truly didn't have a single penny to spare. There were nights I had to calculate if I'd still have enough for Mitt's school fees after paying the interest, but Mrs. Bitch didn't remember those hardships. She only remembered that her son bought a house by the sea but wouldn't buy her one of her own. After that, the relatives on his side started whispering in her ear. Some would say, "Vin has a wife now and has forgotten his mother." Others added fuel to the fire, saying it was a shame to have such a beautiful beach house while leaving his old mother in the country. Some even hinted that all the money must be in the daughter-in-law's hands. Quote, "It's hard for poor Vin to show his filial piety." At first, those words were just like a passing breeze, but day after day, they became a thorn buried deep in Mrs. Bitch's heart. She grew more convinced that I controlled the money, prevented my husband from being filial, and was the reason she lost face with the relatives. Whenever someone asked why she didn't have her own place in Ha Long, she would force a smile, then call Vin to reproach him for being cold. From feeling slighted, she turned to resentment. From resentment, she turned it into a silent way of seeking revenge. If we wouldn't buy her a house, she would drag the entire extended family down every summer to stay. She would make me taste the feeling of my own home no longer belonging to me. Mrs. Bitch said it straight out in front of everyone. Her voice was trembling but full of spite. "I don't need your property deeds. I don't even care to take your house. I just want you to understand what it feels like to be replaced in your son's heart. Since you got a wife, all you see is your wife and child. Whatever I say is wrong. Whatever the relatives need is a burden." I felt a chill down my spine hearing that. It turns out that for the past 2 years, she wasn't just being thoughtless, let alone trying to give relatives a place to stay for the summer. She knew I was exhausted, she knew MIT lost her room, she knew how cramped the house was, yet it was because she knew that she let it all happen. She wanted me uncomfortable, she wanted me to feel helpless, she wanted to turn this house into a place where I felt overwhelmed, as a way to punish me for stealing her son. Vin stood still for a long time. His face showed not just anger but a deep, profound pain. He looked at his mother, his voice choked up, yet every word remained clear. "You want to be loved, yet you choose to make my wife and child suffer. You want me to think of you, yet you make my daughter afraid every summer. Do you think that counts as winning?" Mrs. Bitch did not answer. For the first time since this morning, she turned away, while I stood in the middle of a house still cluttered with boxes and the eyes of our relatives. I finally understood the root cause of why everything went so far. There are people who aren't truly short on money, nor do they really need a place to stay. What they need is control. And when they can no longer control through love, they are ready to use their own kin to retaliate. After venting all the resentment in her heart, my mother-in-law did not soften at all. On the contrary, she acted like someone who had granted herself the right to be hurt, then used that very hurt to punish everyone. That afternoon, she didn't eat dinner, didn't say a word to me, just sat in the corner of the living room making endless phone calls. Her voice was sometimes choked, sometimes trembling, then deliberately lowered like an old mother just abandoned by her child. I was in the kitchen washing dishes and could still faintly hear every sentence. "I'm telling you, I'm in so much pain. Raised my son until he was grown." In the end, he listened to his wife and reported his own sister to the authorities. Then a moment later, she told someone else, "I only stayed with my son for a few summer months and they charged me for every penny. Even for their own mother, they treated me like a paying tenant." Ask yourselves, is there any love left? With every phone call, she added a few more tears and left out more of the truth. Eventually, in her version of the story, my husband and I became unfilial, while Hong Nung and Tuan Koa were just poor relatives we had backed into a corner. Only a few hours later, the family group chat exploded. Messages poured in so fast my phone started overheating. Some scolded me directly, saying I'd become rich and started looking down on them. Others hinted that even when a mother-in-law visits, she gets charged rent. Daughters-in-law these days are truly terrifying. Someone even wrote something very harsh. Living near the beach and not letting relatives stay over. Living like that, even if you die one day, no one will come to see you. I read it and felt numb. Not a single one of them asked what had actually happened. They only listened to Ms. Bitch cry and then blindly condemned us. Towards evening, an uncle from my husband's side sent a private message to Vin. He is the eldest person in the family. His words are usually obeyed by everyone. The message was only a few lines but full of pressure. There's a family video meeting tonight. You and your wife must be present. Apologize to your mother and to Nung properly. Can't you settle things privately instead of making a scene and letting outsiders get involved? I handed the phone to Vin to see, my heart completely exhausted. I thought he would sigh and tell me to endure it one more time for the sake of peace. But Vin just looked at me, his gaze very steady. This time we won't hide anymore. If they want a meeting, we'll have a meeting. That night, at exactly 8 o'clock, the computer screen in the living room lit up and individual boxes appeared. Uncle Ba, Aunt Tu, Uncle Nam, several relatives from the countryside, and a few cousins. My mother-in-law sat deliberately in the center of the frame on my side, wearing a dark brown oud dye, hair neatly combed, her face pale as if she had suffered a great injustice. She said nothing at first, just bowed her head to wipe away her tears. With that look, anyone unaware of the situation would certainly think she is an elderly mother mistreated by her stepchild. Hong Nung also joined the call from another angle, her face swollen, eyes red, and voice hoarse as if she had been crying all day. My younger brother reported people to inspect the goods, and now I've lost hundreds of millions. What did I do to deserve this? I only wanted to earn some money for my 2 kids, yet I was stabbed in the back by my own brother. Tuan Koa chimed in immediately. We just wanted to earn some extra money over the summer. If you two wouldn't help, you didn't have to be so difficult. Now they're calling me in for questioning, and the whole family is losing face. The atmosphere of the meeting immediately tilted in their favor. An uncle frowned as he looked at Vin through the screen. Even if your sister is wrong, she is still your sister. If outsiders handle this, the whole family loses all its dignity. Are you the younger brother and yet you don't know how to think? Another aunt looked at me and said, Dung, dear, as a wife, you must know how to be soft. If your husband is hot-headed, you must hold him back, not pour oil on the fire. When there's trouble in your husband's family, it's not right to bring it out into the open. Quote, I sat beside Vin, hands on my lap, quietly listening as they turned us into the cause of everything. Vin didn't argue back immediately. He just opened the blue briefcase next to the table and took out a drive to plug into the computer. As Mr. Back continued, now, you two apologize to your mother and your sister Nung first. We'll figure out the rest later. Vin calmly replied, I don't need anyone to take my side, but before you make us apologize, I'd like to show everyone a few things. The screen immediately shifted to the first security clip, showing Tuan Koa using a spare key to open our gate early in the morning while we were still upstairs. Next was the scene of each carton being moved into the first floor. Then the scene of Hong Nung standing in the middle of the house telling her child to put price tags on the boxes. The scene where she walked into Little Mit's room without permission and opened my child's wardrobe. The final clip showed the children jumping on her bed while little MIT stood at the door crying. No one on the call said another word. Vin continued by opening screenshots of Hong Nung's sales posts. Every post showing my address, every customer chat about orders, every revenue figure from bank transfers was compiled. He didn't add or subtract anything, didn't insult anyone, just let the images speak for themselves. When the post showing over 300 million in summer profits appeared, I saw people on the screen bow their heads, adjust their glasses, or pretend to lose connection and turn off their cameras. Only then did Vin look straight at the screen, his voice not loud but every word clear. I just want to ask you all one question. If this were your house, would you let 8 people open the gate at dawn, stay for 3 months occupying your child's room, use your home as a warehouse, and then when asked to leave, go online to claim you kicked children out onto the street? That question dropped into the meeting like a heavy stone. No one could answer immediately. Some of those who had initially scolded us harshly began to evade the topic. The eldest uncle cleared his throat, his tone softening. If that is true, then Nung is indeed wrong. But before he could finish, Mrs. Bitch burst into tears. She beat her chest, her voice choked. I only wanted the whole family to have a place to vacation. What did I do wrong? I did it because I love my family. Now you bring cameras and documents to denounce your mother. How can I ever show my face again? Quote, I had been silent from the start, but hearing the words, love my family, I could no longer hold back. I stood up, looked straight at the screen, my voice slightly trembling but very clear. Loving your family does not mean taking someone else's house as common property. Mom, you love Nung and the relatives. I understand that. But who cared for my daughter when she lost her bedroom for 2 summers? Who cared for her when friends asked if her mother was a cruel person for kicking kids out onto the street? Who cared for my husband and me when we didn't even have room to breathe in our own home? The room went deathly silent. On the screen, the faces that had just been harsh suddenly became awkward. I looked at each person, for the first time no longer afraid of being judged. I just felt tired for having to explain something so obvious. A small family's home cannot become a place for the whole clan to enter at will in the name of kinship. And my question finally left those defending Mrs. Bitch unable to say another word. I thought after that video family meeting, things would at least calm down for a few days. Even though my mother-in-law wouldn't admit fault, and Hong Nung remained bitterly silent, the evidence Vin presented made most relatives stop defending her blindly. I thought perhaps once everyone saw the truth for themselves, Mrs. Bitch would know when to stop. But I forgot that for someone who values face over right and wrong, losing in silence hurts more than being scolded in public. 2 days later, near noon, the Ha Long sun glared white against the street. I was tidying up a few remaining boxes on the first floor. Little MIT was in the living room doing summer homework, while Vin went to meet a homestay owner to discuss room maintenance. The house had just gotten quiet when a loud noise suddenly erupted outside the gate. It wasn't the relatives anymore, but the voices of many strangers. The clatter of suitcase wheels and children calling out noisily. I stepped out and cracked the door to look. Outside my gate was a group of nearly 30 people, adults and kids alike, all heavily laden. Some wore travel hats, some sunglasses, pulling suitcases or carrying large bags. A tour bus had just parked not far away. The driver was unloading more foam boxes and backpacks. I stood frozen, thinking they had the wrong address, but just then, a middle-aged woman in a floral dress stepped up, checked the house number on her phone, and shouted, "Is this Ms. Bitch's family guest house? She told us to come, we've already booked for 3 days and 2 nights. I stood there stunned. Ms. Bitch's family guest house. Those 5 words hit me so hard it took a few seconds to understand what was happening. I tried to keep my voice calm as I asked, "Ma'am, who did you say you booked with?" The woman handed me her phone to see. On the screen was a chat log with my mother-in-law's Zalo account. Mrs. Bitch had sent photos of our house front with a blurb, "Family homestay right by the beach. It's very convenient to walk to the bathing area. Just come on down, I'll take care of the rooms." I looked closely at every single message, my hands turning ice cold. She didn't just send one message. She sent a full booking schedule, a list of adults and children, told the group what personal items to bring, and promised them a kitchen, a washing machine, and space to cook seafood. The worst part is that she already took a deposit. The woman immediately said, "We already transferred 15 million to Ms. Bai. She said this was her son's house. Nothing to worry about. We've been traveling since early this morning, so don't tell us there are no rooms." I hurriedly called Vin. Less than 10 minutes later, he raced home. His face went pale when he saw nearly 30 people crowding in front of the gate. Little MIT stood fearfully behind the door, eyes wide as she stared at the strangers. Some children in the group even pointed inside the house, asking, "Mom, where's our room? I want to sleep upstairs." Hearing that, my heart felt crushed. The house had just escaped being taken over by relatives, and now it was about to be swarmed by strangers, all because my mother-in-law took it upon herself to book them. Vin called Mrs. Bitch right away. She answered very quickly, as if she had been waiting for the call. Vin growled, "Where are you?" "There's a group of nearly 30 guests in front of my house. They say you took their booking money." On the other end, Mrs. Bitch wasn't as panicked as I expected. She replied coolly, "Yes, I did take it. It's a waste to leave the house empty. I found guests for you, and you're complaining?" I thought I had misheard her. Vin gripped the phone tightly, his voice dropping low. "You took their money without asking the homeowners. Are you planning to make my wife and me sleep on the street?" Mrs. Bitch scoffed, "It's only 3 days, it won't kill anyone. You two can just go stay in a hotel for a while. The guests traveled a long way. It would be a disgrace to turn them away. You're in the service industry, don't you know how to keep customers?" That remark chilled me to the bone. It turns out she had planned it all. "If we don't take this group, we'll be labeled as untrustworthy and unreliable, leaving travelers stranded. If we do take them, the house will be occupied once again, only this time, by strangers instead of relatives." No matter which way she chose, she wanted to corner us and make us look like the villains in front of everyone. The group of guests began to lose patience. An older man frowned. We don't know what's going on with you, but if you've taken the money, you have to be responsible. If you tell us there's no room now, we're posting this online for everyone to see." A young man in the group held up his phone to record our gate, muttering about what kind of homestay booking this is where the host refuses to let them in. I looked at little MIT hiding behind the door, her face pale, gripping the hem of her shirt tightly. The poor girl was terrified of strangers entering our home. Vin took a deep breath and spoke to his mother on the phone. "Transfer the entire deposit back right now so I can pay the guests. You caused this mess, so you have to solve it." There was silence on the other end for a few seconds, then Mrs. Bitch stammered, "That money, I've used it temporarily." Vin asked immediately, "Used it for what?" She was silent for another moment before saying quietly, "None needed money to pay a fine and restock her goods, so I transferred it to her first. In a few days, when she makes sales, she'll pay it back." My head was spinning as I heard that. Both Vin and I were stunned into silence. She not only took bookings without permission and used our house as collateral for her promises, but she also used strangers' deposits to cover Hong Nung's mistakes. One wrong on top of another, and it all ends up falling on our shoulders. Vin slowly hung up the phone. For the first time, I saw that his eyes were no longer hesitant. He turned to the group and said every word clearly. "I apologize that you all were scammed. This is our private home. We have never listed it for rent, nor have we received any deposits. The person who took your money is my mother, but she has no right to use this house for business." After saying that, he called the local police to intervene and invited a few people from the group to stay as witnesses. When Mrs. Bitch heard her son call the police, she hurried over by taxi. As soon as she stepped out, she rushed to the gate, her hair a mess and face pale, yet she was still shouting, "Are you trying to put your own mother in jail? Are you humiliating your mother in front of strangers just for some deposit money?" Vin looked at his mother, his voice hoarse with pain but firm. "You dragged yourself here. I'm just not letting you drag my wife and me down with you." The group of guests now understood part of the situation. The middle-aged woman from earlier turned to Mrs. Bitch, her voice sharp. "You took our money, sent pictures of someone else's house, promised it was available, and now you say your son is humiliating you? You're the one who scammed us, no one else." A few others also began to voice their accusations. For the first time, Mrs. Bitch wasn't being challenged by her son or daughter-in-law, but by strangers pointing out her dishonesty directly to her face. And in that moment, I knew her final veneer of morality had completely fallen away. After the group of strangers swarmed the gate, this was no longer just a family conflict. It had turned into a massive rift, exposing everything my mother-in-law had long hidden under a cloak of morality. That evening, after the local police recorded the incident and the group was instructed to deal with Mrs. Bitch directly to get their deposit back, our house finally quieted down, but Vin couldn't sleep. He sat at his desk until nearly dawn, with his computer, phone, and an old notebook in front of him. I made him a cup of ginger tea and set it by his hand. The computer screen was filled with rows of bank statements from the past 3 years. Every payment sent to his mother appeared clearly, sometimes 5 million, sometimes 10 million, there were times it was 30 or 50 million. The transfer descriptions sometimes noted medicine, sometimes roof repairs, other times just that she needed it urgently. Some entries had no note at all because Vin sent them in a rush after one of her tearful phone calls. I sat down beside him without saying a word. Throughout all these years, I have never forbidden my husband from providing for his mother. I only reminded him that if he wanted to give her money, he still could. But he should keep clear records so we would know what was for the house and what was for her. So it wouldn't be confusing every single month. That was all. Yet every time Mrs. Bitch found out I asked about the money, she would tell our relatives that I controlled my husband, kept his wallet, and wouldn't let him be a dutiful son. Once, she even called me directly, choking up, saying I wasn't dead yet, but you're already begrudging every penny my son sends his mother. Back then, I actually blamed myself. I thought perhaps I really was being too calculating. But looking at the thick bank statements before me, I realized Vin had never neglected his mother over the past 3 years. He sent money regularly, even more than we could afford during months when work was tough. It's just that Ms. Bitch was never satisfied because what she needed wasn't just money. Near noon the next day, Vin was preparing documents to send back to the group of clients to confirm the responsibility lay with his mother. His phone rang. The caller was Aunt Lan, a relative on my mother-in-law's side. Aunt Lan was naturally quiet. I had only met her a few times at death anniversaries before. Vin picked up and turned on the speakerphone because I was sitting right next to him. The voice on the other end was very soft. "Vin, I've been thinking about this all night. There's something I feel I'd be wrong not to tell you and your wife. Vin paused. Aunt Lan sighed and explained, it turns out my mother-in-law was not as destitute as she always claimed. The house in the countryside was renovated years ago. It didn't leak, nor was it cracked like she used to say. Her medical expenses also weren't so high that she needed to ask for money urgently every single month. She even has a private savings account at the credit fund. It's a significant sum, from selling the old garden plot combined with money her children and grandchildren have given her for years. But she always hid it because she wanted to maintain the image of a pitiful mother forgotten by her son after he got married. Aunt Lan added, every time Vin sends money back, Ms. Bitch doesn't use it all for herself. She takes a portion to treat relatives, buy gifts, and hire cars for beach trips, then tells everyone that Vin and Dung invited the whole family to come visit. Because of that, many people in the family think my husband and I are wealthy and generous, voluntarily covering all costs to gain a reputation for filial piety. When we started to refuse, she feared losing face and fabricated stories that I was inciting my husband to be unfilial, and that Vin was being controlled by his wife. I was stunned into silence. All those judgmental stares, the whispers behind my back, and being dragged to that house every summer as an obligation, it all turned out to be nothing more than pride built on my husband's own money. Vin sat still for a long time, the phone still pressed to his ear, but he couldn't utter a single word. Aunt Lan was choked with emotion. She knew it wasn't right to bring this up, but after seeing her take money from the guests yesterday and blame it all on you too, she couldn't take it anymore. Bitch doesn't lack money, dear. What she lacks is the feeling of being praised for having a successful son. After the call ended, Vin sat silently at the table. I saw his eyes turn red. Perhaps he wasn't just hurting because his mother hid the truth about money, but because he finally realized he had been turned into a tool for her to show off. In her eyes, he was no longer a son, but a billboard displayed before their relatives. My son is talented, my son is filial, my son bought a beach house, my son supports the whole clan. That afternoon, Vin arranged to meet Mrs. Bitch at a seaside cafe. I went with him but sat quietly to the side so he could talk to his mother himself. The cafe was empty. In the distance, waves lapped steadily, and the late afternoon sun spread a thin layer of gold over the water. Mrs. Bitch arrived nearly 10 minutes late, maintaining her cold expression. She sat down, placed her bag on the table, and said immediately, "Did you call me here to lecture me again?" Vin didn't answer right away. He placed a stack of bank statements, some photos of the guests from yesterday, booking messages, and notes from Aunt Lan's call in front of her. As soon as Mrs. Bitch saw those documents, her face changed rapidly. Vin said slowly, "You don't lack money, Mom. You lack the feeling of being better than others. You want relatives to look at you with admiration. You want everyone to know you have a successful son, but you use my wife as the price for your pride." Mrs. Bitch was speechless for a few seconds before immediately turning her face away. "I did it so people would know you're a filial son. You're successful, yet you leave your mother to live quietly in the countryside. What if people laugh in my face? What is wrong with bragging about my own son?" Vin looked at his mother, his voice hoarse but firm. "Filial piety isn't for you to show off, and it isn't for you to use my name to take money from others and then make my wife suffer the consequences. If my devotion makes my wife miserable and makes my daughter afraid every summer, then it is no longer devotion, it is injustice." Mrs. Bitch opened her mouth to speak, but this time her tears no longer swayed Vin. In front of her were statements, messages, and transaction records, the truth that cannot be bent by a few self-pitying remarks. She looked at me with a still bitter gaze, but she could no longer claim I was controlling my husband's money, because those numbers proved exactly the opposite. I had stayed silent to let my husband show his devotion, while she used that very devotion as a stage for herself. Vin stood up, pushed his chair back slightly, and said the final words clearly. "Starting next month, I will send you a fixed monthly allowance. You can use it for your living expenses and medicine as you see fit, but any additional costs must be clearly explained. And from now on, no group of relatives may come to my house without the consent of both me and Dung. My house is not a place for you to maintain your vanity." Mrs. Bitch sat stunned. For the first time, she couldn't win by crying. I looked at the woman in front of me and suddenly found her both infuriating and pathetic. But pity does not mean continuing to let her hurt my family. That afternoon, when we left the coffee shop, I knew Vin was no longer the son who only knew how to bow his head before his mother. He learned that filial piety also needs boundaries. Otherwise, devotion will become a noose choking his own small family. After that afternoon at the seaside cafe, things didn't end immediately as I had hoped. My husband's relatives were clearly divided into two factions. One side stayed silent, perhaps because they had seen too much evidence to continue defending her blindly. The other side still blamed us for overreacting, saying family matters should be kept behind closed doors. Don't let family members lose face. But this time it was strange. I didn't feel as much pain as before. Words only hurt when you still doubt yourself, but once you know you are protecting what is right, they no longer matter. Those words were just like the wind passing by outside the door. Hong Nung then had to deal with the entire issue of the undocumented goods. Some of the goods were processed according to regulations, others had to have their origins proven to be recovered. She no longer dared to use my home address to sell her products. Her online sales page also quietly changed its name and address, removing the mention of the beach location linked to our home. Tuan Koa reluctantly brought back the spare key. He stood at the gate, looking embarrassed, no longer showing the flippant attitude of the previous days. Vin took the key and said briefly, "From now on, if you want to enter the house, you must ring the bell. You'll pay to fix the gate lock, clean the warehouse, and fix the scratches on the car." Tuan Koa also had to contribute a small amount, but enough for him to understand that damaging others' property can't be resolved with just a smile and a mention of being brothers. As for the group of guests that my mother-in-law had booked, they were eventually refunded from her own personal savings. Vin did not give her a single penny. He made it very clear, if you accepted the money, you pay it back. I cannot use my wife's money to fix the messes you made on your own anymore. That sounded cold, but I know it must have pained him deeply to be able to say it. Mrs. Bitch angrily returned to the countryside the very next day. Before leaving, she stood at my gate, pulling a small suitcase, her face as cold as stone. She looked at Vin and said, "From now on I will never step foot in this house again, live with your wife and child, consider that I don't have this son." If it were before, perhaps Vin would have softened, run after her to coax her, and ask her to stay a few more days. But that day he just stood still for a long time and replied in a hoarse voice, "When you come down as a mother, I will open the door. But if you come down to drag your whole clan along, I will have to keep the gate locked." Mrs. Bitch said nothing more, just turned and walked away. I watched her silhouette fade away down the alley, feeling no sense of triumph. After all, she is still my mother-in-law, the mother of the man I love. But some relationships, to continue, must know where to stop. If we keep hurting each other in the name of kinship, in the end, what remains isn't family, but only exhaustion and resentment. After that day, my house returned to its quiet state. The silence I once thought was ordinary now feels strangely precious. In the morning, I hear MIT opening her door, humming a nursery rhyme while brushing her teeth, and Vin making coffee in the kitchen. The living room is no longer covered in mattresses, the balcony no longer drips with wet swimsuits, and the ground floor is free from the smell of cardboard boxes, plastic floats, and piled-up goods. Our little house seems to let out a long sigh after being stifled for so many summers. MIT is the happiest of all. She tidied up her bedroom herself, put her teddy bears back in place, wiped down her desk, and arranged her books on the shelf. That afternoon, she cut out a piece of pink cardboard, carefully wrote each letter, and taped it to her door. "Please knock before entering." I stood behind her, and seeing those words, I felt a lump in my throat. An 8-year-old child should only have to worry about school and play, yet she already has to learn how to protect her own space. I held her in my arms. She looked up and asked, "Mom, from now on, I don't have to give up my room anymore, right?" I stroked her hair and whispered, "Yes, it's your room, so you have the right to say yes or no." That summer, instead of busily serving the whole extended family, my husband and I turned the ground floor into a tidy workspace. Vin created a clear set of rules for the accommodation service he manages. Guests book through an official platform with set prices, check-in dates, specific numbers of people, and terms for compensation if items are damaged. I help him check the books and refine the procedures. For the first time, we are providing a service based on our own initiative, rather than silent sacrifice for those who only know how to take. A month later, Ms. Bitch called Vin. I was sitting nearby, so I could hear her voice through the speakerphone. Her voice was less harsh, but still hesitant. She asked how MIT was, if we were busy with guests, and if Vin still had stomach aches from staying up late. She didn't apologize, at least not yet. But in that voice, I heard something that had softened. Vin didn't force his mother to admit she was wrong right away. He just replied slowly, "Take your time to think, my door is always open for family, but closed to exploitation. Hearing that, I felt my heart lighten significantly. This battle was never meant to sever the mother-child bond, nor to compete with relatives. We just wanted to keep a place to return to after tiring days, a room where our daughter can sleep peacefully, a home where, upon walking through the door, we don't have to worry about someone else coming to take our space. A house near the sea can welcome the wind, the sun, the sound of the waves, and relatives who truly come to visit, but a home cannot forever welcome those who use the name of kinship to cross others' boundaries. If there is still love in a family, we must know how to maintain peace for one another. Because sometimes guarding a door is not being selfish, but the last way to keep the home inside from being swept away by greed and pride.